The first thing Sarah noticed wasn't the man's face. It was the reflection of his knife glinting in the river. The water caught the steel like a shard of moonlight, rippling as though it were alive. She froze, her bare feet sinking into the muddy bank, the wooden bucket in her hand slipping sideways until it crashed into the shallows. The splash shattered the stillness of dusk, sending a flock of blackbirds screeching up from the reeds. Her heart lurched. She wasn't supposed to be here, not this far downriver, not where the cottonwoods grew so thick that shadows twisted into shapes. Her father had warned her since she was a child, don't linger by the river, don't stray past the fence line. Apache land begins there. And now, one of them stood before her. He rose from the undergrowth like he'd been carved from the earth. Itself tall, broad across the chest, his skin bronzed by sun and scarred by battles Sarah could only imagine. His long black hair fell loose across his shoulders, strands catching in the evening light. He wore no shirt, only a strip of leather tied at his waist and a necklace of bone that rested against his chest. The knife was in his hand, but his eyes dark, steady, and burning held her still more fiercely than any weapon. For a breathless moment neither of them moved. Sarah's throat tightened. The smell of the river swirled around her, damp reeds, moss, the faint iron tang of mud stirred by her dropped bucket. She thought of her father back at the farmhouse, oil lamp burning in the kitchen, rifle propped by the door. If she screamed loud enough, maybe he'd hear. Maybe her brother would come running. But her voice stuck. The man tilted his head slightly, as though listening to something far away, then spoke. His words were low, deep, and shaped by an accent unfamiliar to her ears. "What if I touch you?" The question hit harder than a threat. Her stomach dropped. Her breath snagged in her chest. She didn't understand. Was it a warning, a promise, a test? The space between them tightened like a noose. Her first instinct was to run. She had outrun coyotes before, barefoot in these same fields. But something about the way he stood, shoulders squared, weight grounded in the earth, told her she wouldn't make it 3 steps before he caught her. She swallowed hard. "You shouldn't be here," she managed, her voice thin and shaking. His lips curved, not into a smile, but into something like sorrow. "Neither should you?" The wind shifted, carrying the sharp scent of smoke. She glanced past him and saw the faint remains of a fire pit hidden among the trees, ash still warm, a scrap of roasted corn husk smoldering. He had been living here, right under their noses, just across the river. Her pulse quickened. If her father knew, he would bring every rifle from town. Men would come with ropes and torches. Sarah's stomach turned at the thought of blood soaking into the very ground she stood on. The warrior must have seen her fear because he lowered the knife. Slowly, deliberately, he slid it back into the sheath at his hip. His hands, though scarred and strong, opened empty before her. "I don't want your land," he said quietly, voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I don't want your fight." His eyes held hers, unblinking. "I want nothing." Sarah's breath caught again, not from fear, but from the way he said it, as though wanting nothing was worse than death. The sky above them burned orange with the last light of day. The cicadas had started their evening song, rising and falling like a tide. Everything around them, the rustle of reeds, the ripple of water, seemed to press in on the moment, trapping them both inside it. Sarah bent to grab her bucket, fingers trembling, and when she straightened, he had stepped closer. Not enough to touch, not enough to corner, but close enough that she could see the faint scar running from his collarbone to the curve of his ribs, close enough that she could hear the steadiness of his breath. Her own breath betrayed her. It escaped in a trembling rush, shallow and uneven, louder than she wanted. His eyes flickered toward her chest, then back to her face, and she knew he had heard it too. That was when she realized. It wasn't her father's warnings that kept her frozen, nor the knife, nor the fear of death. It was him. the exile, the danger, the forbidden presence standing before her. And though she knew she should flee, Sarah stood at the river's edge, unable, unwilling to take a single step back. His name was Tahu, though to most who spoke of him in hushed tones, he was only the exiled one. Sarah learned his name the following evening, though she hadn't meant to return to the river. She had sworn to herself she wouldn't. She had lain awake all night, listening to the creak of the rafters above her bed and the rustle of coyotes on the far ridge, telling herself that what had happened, what she had felt, was nothing more than fear mixed with imagination. But come dusk, her feet betrayed her, carrying her down the winding dirt path, buckets swinging at her side, though she knew she wouldn't use it. The river waited, quiet and deceptive in its calm. The cottonwoods leaned like sentinels, their silver leaves catching the light of the setting sun. And he was there again, crouched near the remains of the fire she'd glimpsed before. He didn't startle when she appeared. He didn't reach for the knife at his hip. He simply lifted his gaze, steady and unreadable. "You came back," he said. Sarah flushed, clutching her bucket tighter. "No, I needed water." His lips curved just enough to suggest he didn't believe her. But he said nothing more. Instead, he tossed a stick into the ashes and stirred them, coaxing a thin curl of smoke into the air. That was when she dared to ask, her voice barely above the sound of the river. "What's your name?" For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he looked at her as though testing her worth. Tahu. The name slid over her like flint striking steel sharp, solid, alive. Sarah didn't know what she expected to feel upon hearing it. Relief? Curiosity? Instead, she felt the air shift between them, as though a door had opened that could never be shut again. Later, much later, she would piece together fragments of his story through overheard whispers in town, through words he offered reluctantly by the river, through the silence in his eyes when she pressed too hard. But even now, she sensed the weight he carried. Tahu had been born into a respected Apache family, son of a warrior who had led raids and treaties alike. But somewhere along the path of blood and honor, Tahu had chosen differently. He had once loved a woman from another band, loved her enough to stand against his own chief when judgment fell upon her family. The punishment had been swift: exile, stripped of his place, his right to fight or to belong. To the Apaches, he was a traitor. To the settlers, he was a threat. Caught between two worlds, he belonged nowhere. Sarah could see that truth etched into him, in the way his shoulders seemed built to carry burdens far heavier than his own body, in the scars that crisscrossed his chest, in the solemn patience with which he watched the river flow, as though it alone understood him. "Why do you stay here?" she asked one evening, days after learning his name. Her courage had grown in inches, though it still trembled beneath the surface. "If my father saw you, if the town knew—" "They know," Tahu interrupted. His voice was deep, but not unkind. He picked up a smooth stone, rolling it between his fingers before letting it drop into the water with a muted plunk. "They watch, they whisper, but I stay. Because I was here before them. Because this river does not belong to your father, or to your people." Sarah's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to defend her family, her town, but the words stuck. Deep down, she knew he was right. The river had run long before her father's fence posts dug into the soil. "You don't belong here," she murmured at last, though the words sounded wrong even as she spoke them. Tahu's gaze pierced her. "I don't belong anywhere." The statement settled between them like smoke, thick and choking. Sarah felt it wrap around her heart, squeezing until she struggled to breathe. And yet, she couldn't walk away. Each evening after that, she found herself drifting back to the river. She told herself it was curiosity, that she wanted to understand the man everyone feared and despised. But deep down, it was something else. Something she dared not name, because each time she looked into Tahu's eyes, she saw not a warrior, not an exile, but a man who carried loneliness like a second skin. And something inside her longed to touch it, to peel it away, to see who he might become if he were no longer alone. The night Sarah returned to the river with a lantern in her hand, she told herself it was only for water. But the bucket at her side betrayed her. It was empty, and her thirst had nothing to do with the well. The moon hung low, swollen and pale, draping silver across the reeds. Crickets hummed in the grass, and the faint rush of water carried the scent of moss and cedar. Sarah's feet hesitated on the muddy bank, her heart thudding in rhythm with the flicker of the lantern she held. He was there, Tahu, crouched near a fire he had built from fallen cedar branches. The flames were small, careful, but their glow painted his body in bronze and shadow. The muscles in his arms tightened as he fed a twig to the fire, his long hair catching bits of light like strands of midnight silk. His face was calm, yet his eyes dark and deep lifted toward her the moment she stepped into the glow. "You shouldn't be here," Sarah whispered, though her voice betrayed more tremor than command. "You came," Tahu said simply. The answer stole her breath. She tried to look away, to pretend she had only wandered near by accident, but the truth burned hotter than the fire between them. She had chosen to come, and he knew it. Her lantern cast a trembling glow over the river's surface, but it was his fire that warmed her skin. He motioned toward a flat stone by the flames. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she sat smoothing her dress across her knees, trying to calm the wild flutter of her heart. Tahu reached beside him and pulled something wrapped in husk from the fire. He peeled it back slowly, revealing roasted corn, steaming and golden. With quiet care, he broke a piece and held it out to her. Sarah's hand shook as she took it. Her fingers brushed against his for only an instant, but it was enough to send a shiver through her. The corn tasted smoky, sweet, and warm, but the food itself vanished from her senses almost instantly. What lingered was the echo of his touch, silence. Wrapped around them, filled only by the soft crackle of the fire and the chorus of night insects. Tahu sat with his legs crossed, shoulders strong and relaxed, as though he were rooted in the earth itself. Sarah stole a glance at him, then quickly looked away, ashamed of the heat that flushed her cheeks. Finally, she broke the silence. "They say you were cast out." Tahu's gaze shifted, heavy and unflinching. He did not deny it. "They say many things, but is it true?" Her voice wavered. He stared into the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes. "I did not kneel when I was told. I did not hate who I was told to hate. So they cast me away." His words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. Sarah hugged her arms to her chest. In town, men were praised for fighting, for standing tall. But here was a man who had been punished for refusing to bend. She didn't know whether to fear him or admire him. "You risk everything being here," she said softly. If anyone saw us?" "They already know I am here," Tahu interrupted, his voice calm, almost resigned. He looked at her then, his gaze steady and unshaken. "But they do not know you are here." Her chest tightened. She wanted to protest, to tell him she wasn't, she couldn't be, but the words stuck in her throat. Her presence alone was the truth. The fire cracked, sending sparks spiraling into the night. Sarah's breath caught again, too loud in the silence. Tahu's eyes flickered toward her, sharp and searching, and then softened. "Why do you come?" "Sarah?" he asked. She had no answer. Not one she could give aloud. Her hands gripped the fabric of her dress, twisting it in her lap. She could say she was curious. She could say she was afraid. But both would be lies. The truth was simpler, and far more dangerous. She came because the world felt less empty when she was near him. And so she said nothing. Tahu leaned back slightly, his profile etched by the firelight. The shadows made him look both fierce and untouchable, yet the way he sat quiet, composed, carried a loneliness she could feel in her bones. The night deepened, the river murmuring its endless song. Sarah's lantern burned low, and she knew she should rise, should leave, should never return. But when she finally stood, Tahu's voice stopped her. "Tomorrow?" he said quietly. Her heart thudded. She turned, meeting his eyes. "Tomorrow?" His lips did not smile, but his gaze held something, an invitation, a promise, a risk. Yes. Sarah carried her empty bucket home, the taste of smoke and corn still on her tongue, the sound of his voice still echoing in her chest. And though she feared it, she knew tomorrow she would return. The fire had burned low, its glow dwindling into embers, yet Sarah lingered. She should have left hours ago, before the lantern at her side dimmed, before the chill of the night seeped through her thin dress. But something stronger than fear or duty kept her rooted on the riverbank, her knees drawn close, her gaze fixed on the man across from her. Tahu sat in silence, his body still as stone, but Sarah could feel the weight of his presence as keenly as the heat of the fire. His long black hair spilled down his back, shifting with the breeze, and the tribal necklace resting on his chest gleamed faintly in the dying light. She had never been this close to him before, not without distance or shadow between them. Now, the space seemed fragile, something she could cross with a single step, a single breath. Her pulse fluttered. "Why do you look at me so?" she asked, her voice trembling. Tahu's gaze did not falter. "Because you look at me." Her throat tightened. It was true. She had been looking, staring at the sharp lines of his face, the breadth of his shoulders, the scars that traced his skin like a story etched in flesh. She had been drinking in every detail, unable to stop herself. And now he had caught her. In it, Sarah's cheeks burned. She turned her head, but it was too late. His words had stripped her bare. Tahu shifted, leaning forward slightly. The firelight caught the movement, shadows dancing across the hard planes of his body. His hand lifted, slow, deliberate, stopping inches from her wrist. Her breath stopped. He waited long enough for her to pull away, to flee into the night, to return to her father's house and lock the memory of this moment deep inside her. But Sarah didn't move. She couldn't. Every part of her, every nerve and muscle, screamed to stay. When his fingers touched her skin, it was nothing like she had imagined. His hand was rough, calloused from years of labor and war, but the touch itself was gentle, almost reverent. He held her as though she might break, as though the smallest pressure might shatter her completely. Sarah gasped, the sound escaping her before she could stop it. Her chest rose sharply, breath caught between fear and something else, something far more dangerous. "You'll bring ruin to us both," she whispered. Her words trembled in the night, carried away by the river's endless song. Tahu's thumb brushed lightly across the inside of her wrist, tracing the frantic beat of her pulse. His dark eyes locked with hers, and for a moment the world narrowed to nothing but that connection, the river, the fire, the cicadas all fading until there was only him. "I've already been ruined," he said softly. "What more can they take from me?" The sorrow in his voice hit her harder than his touch. She could feel it in her bones, the hollow weight of a man stripped of belonging, of love, of home. It pressed against her heart, demanding she bear part of it with him. Her breath broke, shallow and uneven. She hated how it betrayed her, how it gave him an answer before her lips could form one. But perhaps he needed that answer more than words. Tahu released her wrist slowly, his hand retreating as though afraid to take more than what she had silently given. Still, the ghost of his touch lingered, burning into her skin, racing through her veins. Sarah pulled her knees tighter to her chest, staring into the embers. She wanted to say something, anything to pierce the silence he left behind. But her tongue was heavy, her thoughts tangled. All she knew was that she would never be the same again. The night grew colder. An owl hooted in the distance, its cry echoing through the cottonwoods. Sarah knew she had to leave. If her father woke and found her bed empty, there would be questions she couldn't answer. Yet when she finally rose to her feet, she hesitated. Her hand lingered at her side, aching to reach for him again, to prove that what had just happened wasn't a dream. Tahu watched her go, his eyes unreadable. He didn't call her back, didn't move to stop her. He simply sat in the shadows, the fire painting him in flickers of gold and ash, like a spirit caught between worlds. As Sarah walked home through the dark, her wrist tingled where his fingers had touched her. Each step away from the river felt heavier than the last, as though she were carrying a secret too vast for her small frame to bear. She knew the danger, she knew the cost. But she also knew that come nightfall she would return, because she wanted more, because she wanted him. The night had grown into habit. Sarah's footsteps found the river almost without thought, her lantern bobbing through the cottonwoods like a restless star. She carried her secret in her chest, trembling and alive, the memory of Tahu's hand. On her wrist, the echo of his voice low and certain. But secrets in small towns never stay buried. They fester. They grow. And sooner or later, someone digs them out. Sarah knew something was wrong the moment she stepped back into the farmhouse. One evening, her father's chair by the hearth sat empty, his pipe still smoldering. Her brother's boots were gone, and so was the rifle that usually leaned against the doorframe. Her stomach dropped. "Papa?" she called, her voice echoing through the dim rooms. No answer. Only the hush of wind rattling the shutters. Her eyes landed on the hooks by the door. 2 rifles missing, a lantern gone. A coil of rope pulled down. Panic surged. She didn't stop to think. Her feet carried her out into the night, through the fields, down the path to the river. Her lantern swung wildly, throwing jagged shadows against the grass. The cicadas shrilled as if warning her, as if the whole earth knew what was about to happen. And then she saw them. Her father stood on the bank, lantern burning at his side, his face carved with fury. Beside him, her brother clutched a rifle, his jaw tight with fear and confusion. Both guns were leveled at the figure across the water. Tahu. He stood bare-chested in the moonlight, muscles taut, his long hair falling loose around his shoulders. The tribal necklace rested against his scarred chest, gleaming faintly in the light of fire and lantern. His hands were empty, held slightly away from his body, not raised in surrender, not clenched in defiance, but simply open. "Get away from us." "My daughter." Her father's voice thundered across the river. Sarah's lungs froze. "No," she cried, stumbling forward, nearly tripping on the reeds. "Papa, please." Tahu did not move. He stood as solid as the cottonwoods behind him, his gaze fixed on the men with their guns. His chest rose and fell, slow, steady, as though he had been waiting for this moment all along. "Sarah, come here," her father barked. "Now," she shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "He hasn't hurt me. He isn't what you think." Her brother shifted uneasily, his rifle trembling just slightly in his grip. "Papa," he murmured, his young voice breaking. "Maybe she's telling the truth." "Silence," her father snapped. "He's Apache. He's a danger. You know what they've done, what they'll do again. He's fooled her, that's all. I'll end this now." The rifle lifted higher, aimed square at Tahu's chest. Sarah's scream ripped the night open. "Stop!" She flung herself into the clearing, arms wide, placing her body between the rifle and the man it sought. Her lantern fell from her hand, crashing into the mud, its flame sputtering into sparks. Her father's face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Out of the way, girl." "You'll kill me first," she shouted, her voice hoarse, breaking. "You'll have to." Tahu remained still, his expression unreadable, though his eyes burned with something deeper, something that pinned Sarah in place, reminding her why she had come here night after night. He could have run, he could have fought, but he didn't. He chose stillness. He chose her. The silence stretched like a noose. The river gurgled softly, mocking the tension, while the cicadas fell into a sudden hush. Sarah's brother lowered his gun, his face pale, sweat glistening on his brow. His arms shook too badly to aim. "Papa, please," he whispered. "Don't." But her father's rifle stayed steady. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. She could feel the eyes of all three men locked on her, her father's filled with fury, her brother's with doubt, Tahu's with something unspoken, something that pulled her closer even as death pressed in around them. The night held its breath, and then, with the sharp click of a hammer pulling back, the world tipped toward the edge of gunfire. The night seemed to pause, holding its breath. Sarah's arms trembled as she stood between Tahu and her father's rifle. The glow of the fire and the moonlight painted the world in gold and silver, but the river of tension running through the chiv. Clearing was colder than any winter chill. Tahu's gaze never wavered. His chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately, each breath measured, steady. Every scar on his bronze skin told a story of battles fought and losses endured. And now, in the flickering light, Sarah saw something else, a patience carved from exile, a strength that refused to bend even in the face of death. "Lower your gun," Sarah cried, her voice shaking. "You'll kill him. You'll kill him and you'll destroy everything." Her father's eyes burned with fury, but doubt had begun to flicker behind them. The rigid set of his jaw faltered as he took in Tahu's stillness, the calm, unyielding presence of the man who had haunted Sarah's nights and dreams. "You'll bring shame to this family." Her father spat, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. Sarah's brother shifted, his young hands gripping the rifle tightly, but the gun wavered as he stared at Tahu. "Papa, maybe she's right." Silence. Her father shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. Tahu took a single step forward, his bare feet sinking slightly into the soft riverbank mud. He did not raise his hands in aggression. He did not move with menace. He simply faced them, every inch of him radiating calm, power, and a challenge that could not be ignored. Sarah's chest heaved. She knew the danger, felt it in every nerve, yet she could not leave him exposed. She clenched her fists at her sides, wishing she could take the shot in his place, that she could bear the risk instead of him. "You won't hurt me," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Her father's rifle trembled in his hands. He wanted to fire, to assert authority, to protect his family, yet the unwavering figure before him unsettled him. Tahu had no weapon. He posed no immediate threat, and yet the aura of strength and defiance he carried made the father hesitate. "Sarah," her father said, voice rough, "step away, now." "No," she screamed, fear and desperation mingling in her chest. "You'll have to kill me first." The words echoed through the clearing, cutting through the night. Even the river seemed to hush, as though the world itself recognized the moment's gravity. Tahu's dark eyes met hers, and in them she saw something more than protection, something that held her heart captive, that anchored her courage. He could have run. He could have fought. But he did neither. He remained steady and unyielding, embodying the choice he had already made. For her, for them, for this fragile, impossible connection. The cicadas fell silent. The river murmured softly, as if in prayer. Her brother's hand shook, and slowly the rifle lowered. He dared not breathe, fearing to break the fragile balance. Her father's eyes darted between them, a storm of anger, confusion, and fear warring in his gaze. Yet even he felt the shift. The rigid certainty of his authority could not match the raw power of Tahu's presence, nor the fierce courage of his daughter. A long, unbearable pause stretched. And then, with a ragged exhale, her father dropped the rifle. The sound echoed through the night, a surrender as much to circumstance as to reason. Sarah sank to her knees, tears streaking her cheeks, relief mixing with lingering fear. She looked at Tahu, and for the first time she allowed herself to breathe freely, to feel the weight of safety and longing simultaneously. Tahu stepped forward cautiously, kneeling beside her. His hand brushed against her hair, not a touch of ownership, but a gentle reassurance. "You are safe," he murmured. His voice carried both strength and tenderness, and Sarah leaned into it, allowing herself the fleeting comfort of trust. River reflected their intertwined shadows, firelight and moonlight dancing together. The standoff was over, yet the night had changed them all. What had begun as fear and danger had transformed into understanding, into a fragile truce that neither the river nor the town could undo. Sarah knew, as she pressed her hands against Tahu's chest, that this choice, to trust, to stand, to protect, was only the beginning. The road ahead would be perilous, full of whispers, threats, and judgment. But for the first time, she felt certain of something, that Tahu was not just a warrior, not just an exile. He was hers to stand with, to fight for, and perhaps to love. The night carried its quiet blessing as they rose together. The fires. Embers flickered, the river hummed, and the exiled warrior and the young woman who dared to defy the world found a fragile peace in the heart of danger. Dawn crept quietly over the river, painting the cottonwoods with a soft golden glow. The embers from the night's fire had cooled to gray ash, the water rippling softly as if it, too, breathed a sigh of relief. Sarah sat on the muddy bank, her legs drawn beneath her, the weight of what had transpired pressing and yet freeing at the same time. Tahu remained beside her, silent but present, like a shadow tethered to her side. His bare chest gleamed faintly with morning dew, muscles relaxed after the tension of the previous night. The tribal jewelry around his neck caught the first rays of sunlight, casting tiny fragments of gold across his scarred skin. For the first time, he allowed himself to rest, though his gaze never left her. "You stayed," Sarah whispered, breaking the quiet, her voice barely audible over the gentle rush of the river. "I promised," Tahu said softly, his deep voice carrying across the water. "And promises I keep." Her lips trembled with relief and awe. After all the fear, all the danger, he had remained unchallenged, unbowed, unwavering. And somehow, in that steadfast presence, Sarah realized that fear and desire had become inseparable threads in her heart. The forest around them was alive with morning sounds. Birds warbled, and insects hummed softly, but none of it broke the fragile cocoon that had formed between the two of them. Sarah reached out, her hand hovering above his, and then let it rest lightly against his arm. The skin beneath her fingers was warm, solid, real. Tahu looked down at her. His dark eyes softened with an expression that was almost unrecognizable vulnerability hidden behind a lifetime of exile and survival. "Do you trust me?" he asked, the words quiet but profound. She nodded, the single gesture carrying years of unspoken understanding. "I do." A smile, small and rare, tugged at the corner of Tahu's lips. He extended his hand slowly, offering her a connection that had been denied to him for so long. Sarah grasped it, the warmth and strength of his hand sending a thrill through her. For a brief, suspended moment, the world beyond the river, the fences, the town's judgment, did not exist. There was only the two of them, bound by choice and courage. "Then we leave the past behind," Tahu said, his voice steady, a promise etched in each word. We live for now, for this river, for each other. Sarah's heart swelled. She leaned slightly, resting her head against his shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of his chest, the reassuring pulse beneath the scars that marked his body. For the first time, the world felt wide, dangerous, and yet impossibly alive with possibility. Farther down the river, the farmhouse was quiet. Her father and brother had returned home, the rifles left behind, uncertainty heavy in their hearts. But Sarah no longer feared their judgment, not with Tahu here, not with the dawn breaking over the river like a promise of new beginnings. The water lapped gently at their feet, carrying away the remnants of fear, the echoes of last night's tension. The river that had once been a boundary between worlds now felt like a bridge, a path leading them both into uncharted territory. Tahu's hand tightened around hers, grounding her, reminding her that while danger lingered, courage was not the absence of fear, it was the choice to face it. And they had chosen. Together, Sarah lifted her gaze, meeting his, and saw in him the reflection of her own heart, strength tempered with tenderness, exile tempered with loyalty, solitude tempered with the longing to belong. "You'll stay?" she asked softly. "I will," he replied, the simplicity of the words carrying the weight of everything that had passed: the exile, the standoff, the silent nights at the river. "Here, with you, always." A smile broke across Sarah's face, and for the first time, the morning felt complete. She knew that challenges lay ahead, whispers from town, judgments and threats that would test them both. But the foundation they had built, trust, courage, and the quiet fire of connection, was stronger than anything else. As the sun rose higher, painting the river in brilliant gold and silver, Sarah and Tahu stood together on the bank. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, and she felt the warmth of his hand linger. No words were needed. The river, the trees, and the gentle morning wind carried their promise. Whatever the world demanded, they would face it together. In that moment, the exiled Apache warrior and the young woman who had dared to defy fear found something rare and unbreakable, a place where they truly belonged.